Hi everyone, this is your Derek. Today we are super excited to talk to you about Once Human with notable game designer Greg Ghostcrawler Street, the studio head of Fantastic Pixel Castle and formerly of World of Craft and the League of Legends. As you may notice his Twitter post a few weeks ago, that Greg has the opportunity to try out Once Human and has many beautiful things to say about our game. We are thrilled by his kind words, but more thrilled to have him here join us today to talk about developing Once Human with Woody.
大家好，我是七日世界的主策 Woody， 非常高兴能和大家见面。
Well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here, and it's nice to meet you, Woody. Congratulations on Once Human doing so well on the global wishlist ranking and the Steam Next Fest. And I'm looking forward to the global release on, I think it's July 9th.
非常感谢 Craig。然后我从大学时期的时候就是你的粉丝，我非常清晰的记得那个时候我和我的舍友一起游玩了很多个版本的魔兽世界，然后给我们带来了非常多的乐趣。所以今天也非常高兴能有这个机会和你面对面的来进行沟通和交流。然后我也非常高兴和感谢你能够喜欢 Once Human 的游玩版本。然后是的，我们即将在7月9号和全球的玩家去见面，然后也期待着我们玩家能够喜欢我们的游戏。
So one question I wanted to ask you about is, what made you want to incorporate survival and crafting into an MMO product?
最主要的原因其实是，首先我们的团队的成员都是生存建造类游戏非常热衷的玩家，我们一起游玩了很多的生存建造游戏，比如说 Rust， 比如说 Scum， 然后还有前几年的英灵神殿这样子的生存游戏。然后我们会发现，当我们一起去面对环境之中的挑战的时候，当我们自发的形成了一个目标的时候，它跟多人的社交的结合是天然的。它并不是游戏的系统告诉玩家你需要去形成一个什么样的社交关系，而是我们面对挑战的时候自发去，我们一起要盖一个庄园，我们一起要去探索一片新的区域，我们一起要去战胜一个新的挑战。我觉得当生存建造的自由度结合起社交的自由度的时候，它们之间可以爆发出更好的一个化学反应。
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. We're thinking about a similar approach in the game that my new studio is working on. It's less about the survival elements for us, but we still think that things like building and crafting give new activities to players in an MMO, aside from just the standard doing quests and killing monsters. So my question for you is, do you think that we're going to see more of this going forward?
我们其实正在研发以及正在计划中的玩法有很多是有关这一部分的，就像我刚才提到的，多人或者说多人参与的社交玩法，它是结合到我们游戏的各个系统里面去的。一方面，我们也听到了玩家的声音，会进一步丰富游戏内的PVP 和 PVE 的玩法，来适配多种多样的玩家的一个社交组织的一个形式。不光是大的团队的社交对抗，也有小团队的一个社交协作和对抗，以及如果你是一个独狼玩家，也是完全 OK 的。当然，这个是在比较传统的跟探索和战斗有关的游戏内容上。另外，我们也在尝试的一个点就是结合建造类玩法的一个自由度，我们去给玩家开放更多的具有趣味的交互组件给玩家的一个领地。然后这样子的话，在之后玩家发挥自己的创意，他可以将自己的庄园打造成游乐园，打造成酒吧，打造成派对的现场，然后邀请自己的朋友到自己的领地里来去一起的游玩。我觉得这个也会是我们Once Human 在之后去重点推出的一个社交情境。
Yeah, so because we see that this game genre is not very often. But what we are doing is to combine open world with crafting, survival, MMO all together. So what do you think about this game genre direction in the gaming industry? How do you feel? How do you like it? How do you feel about it?
I find it a really exciting direction. I think while I'm a fan of MMO games, I think the gameplay can get a little stale when you do a lot of the same things over and over. You do quests and fight bosses and things like that. So I really like what the survival elements can add to to the standard kind of RPG framework. And I bet we're going to see a lot more games like this in the future. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'd love to ask you a bit about the theme and the worldview for Once Human. MMOs rely really heavily on the atmosphere and the story of the game. So how are you kind of using that theme to achieve a better experience for players?
作为一个生存游戏，然后生存游戏它最核心的一点是将玩家放置在一个他需要去努力生存下来，他需要努力让自己的生存环境变得更好的一个世界的一个背景下。这也是为什么很多生存游戏它会采用秩序失序，或者说采用后启示录这样子题材的一个原因。那对于我们来说，我们想要给玩家带来不一样的感觉，所以在结合整体的一个富有挑战性的危机背景之下，我们选择了新怪谈这样子的一个题材。那选择这样子的题材，它可以使我们无论是在战斗视觉的表达上，还是在世界场景视觉的表达上，给玩家带来更新鲜、更不一样的体验。因为在这之前，其实还很少有生存建造类的游戏去采用这样子的一个题材。
Yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed about the game when I was playing Once Human is how different the world is. I'm used to fantasy games or post-apocalyptic. I think you really have hit on something fresh here, and I found the world is just beautiful, and the character creation. You can also make a really beautiful character if you choose.
然后，当我们在试图表达新怪谈这样子的题材的时候，其实我们最想要或者说最核心抓住的一个传达的点是，我们把它概括为在正常中去表现不正常，或者在不正常中去表现正常。这个跟很多像那个奇幻作品或者说科幻作品，甚至克苏鲁的作品是不一样的。新怪谈的核心魅力是嫁接在我们的这个现实世界上的。现实世界上的物体，或者说现实世界中的事物发生了变化，变得不正常，才会让人觉得这跟自己的生活是息息相关的。这也是为什么我们游戏选择这样子的题材，然后并且将它跟我们的怪物和我们场景之中的物件结合的原因，它会让我们期待着玩家在我们的世界中会觉得，这个跟我的生活是有那么一丝丝的相关性，它会更有说服力，更有真实感。
Okay, so my next question is actually for Woody. So apart from the theme and atmosphere of New Weird, so what other efforts that you plan to do in this game to continuously provide fresh experience for the players?
除了题材带来的不同之外，我们另外一部分想要给玩家提供不同体验或者说新的体验的设计和方式，是我们游戏里称为剧本制的一个规则。在不同剧本制是指我们在玩家进入游戏之后，可以在我们游戏里去选择不同的剧本，然后不同的剧本它背后可能是不同的区域、不同的游戏内容，然后不同的玩法和不同的规则。这个剧本也会是我们之后在运营和推进更新之中最主要去给玩家提供的单位。我们期待着使用这样子的一个方式，不同喜好和不同倾向的生存类游戏玩家，他其实可以在周期自己的游玩的时间之中，去选择自己心仪的剧本和心仪的游戏内容，和自己的同伴或者自己的好友一起来去进行游玩。更重要的是，我们的想法是，每一个剧本它其实都是，对于玩家来说都是可以自己去参与的一个新的世界和一段新的故事。
Oh, actually, I have one more question that I just asked Woody about how to provide fresh experience to the players in this, open world survival crafting genre. So the same question will be addressed to you as well. So how do you think, in your opinion, like ideally, regardless all of the technical limitations, so how do you think a fresh experience would be like to the players?
Well, I know in the West, the way players play games often is they go kind of look up a guide or they look up the answer so that they know the right way to defeat a boss or to solve a puzzle. So I think having more of these survival elements, and that'll particularly be true in PvP, it will make it harder for players to predict exactly what's going to happen, and they'll have to kind of rely on their wits when new things arise. Do you have a strategy about how you're going to monetize or commercialize the payment for players?
这个其实也是我们在之前决策，然后并且决定坚持不移的坚定下去的形成的一个点，就是我们的游戏不去做任何的数值付费相关的功能，因为我们也非常的清楚，然后对于全球的玩家来讲，有相当多的玩家担心在游戏中会存在着 pay to win 的一个情况，再加上生存游戏的那个过程之中，如何去获得资源，如何去让自己角色成长，以及获得跟其他玩家在竞争和对抗中的优势，是一个非常重要的一个点。我们不希望有任何的付费内容来去破坏掉 SOC 生存游戏的这一部分的一个体验。所以我们才决定，我们不在游戏里边去做任何的数值性的付费内容，而我们的付费的内容最主要的是外观类的付费，然后那个以及服务的付费。服务的付费，我是指类似于像 Battle Pass， 类似于像权益卡这样子，它也并不会说有任何影响那个就是数值成长的内容存在的这一部分的商业化内容。然后我们在测试的过程之中，也不断的在跟玩家去进行沟通，或者说交流，然后也有玩家跟我们再去探讨什么样子的商业化内容是更合适的。对此，我们也始终保持着一个开放的态度，期待着玩家的建议和玩家对我们的批评指正。然后很核心的一个点就是，我们在我们的想法之中，游戏首先得好玩，然后玩家才会愿意来付费，而并不是说为了需要付费或者说营收来去做这么一款游戏。对。
Yeah, that's really awesome, and I bet that will help as well with a global launch because then players around the world can really appreciate the game. Those were the topics I really wanted to talk about. Do you have any other questions on your end?
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, and thank you very much for your time. I think that's pretty much all of the questions I have. Woody, do you have any other questions?
我倒是有一些那个小的问题，想要借这个宝贵的机会跟 Craig 交流一下。首先的一个问题是，就是Once Human 的团队，然后这是我们第一次。然后做出一款作品来去跟全球玩家去进行见面，然后我们非常的激动，然后同时也有一些小小的忐忑。然后 Craig 作为非常有经验的在游戏领域的那个就是设计者，然后尤其是有这么多的作品已经跟全球的玩家进行了见面，然后给全球的玩家提供了那个就是乐趣。然后也想看看 Craig 作为前辈有没有什么建议，或者说那个对于我们的团队进入全球游戏市场有什么建议，或者说有什么经验可以传授？
Well, I think first of all, you have a great game from what I've seen. So hopefully the team feels confident about that. As you know, players can get very passionate and excited. So if they say things that may sound like they're criticizing the game, it could also just be that they're excited about the game and they want it to be better. So you don't have to get like too worried from some of their questions if they seem like that they're too aggressive or too excited about it.
对这一点我们倒是非常有觉悟，然后那个我们也时刻都在 Discord 上去关注着玩家的声音。然后，尤其是即将上线之后，我们也期待着玩家在我们的游戏社区里，尤其是 Discord 频道里，来跟我们做进一步的一个交流。对。然后我这边还有一个问题，就是Once Human， 然后经过了前些年的开发之后，现在终于要进入了一个新的阶段了。然后在这个新的阶段之中，我们的游戏将始终保持着跟玩家见面的同时，然后就像您刚才说的，我们要去给玩家提供更优质、更好的一个内容。然后也想看看，就是也想听听 Craig 的经验里，一款游戏如何在那个就是长期的运营过程之中， 不断的给玩家在那个就是提供新鲜的感觉和新的游玩体验，因为跟玩家见面之后，可能整体的体验它已经相对来说比较确定了。然后就是这样子的一个创意和这样子的设计，它是如何形成的呢？因为我们也注意到，像在全球的市场上，比如魔兽世界，比如说 Final Fantasy 14，然后比如说 Destiny， 其实都以这样子的方式运营了很长时间。然后我也想听听您针对这个模式，或者说这样子的一个设计方向，有没有什么经验和那个就是想要告诉我们的？
Yeah, I think a couple of suggestions. One is it's always helpful to be thinking about things in terms of three different time horizons. The first is, patch or fix problems that players are experiencing right now. The second is be thinking about what you want to do, say, a few months or a year from now. And then finally, like, what's the big long-term vision? Like, where do you want the game to go? Where do you want the story to go? Because if you're too focused on the short term, then you're not thinking about those really big, exciting things you could do in the future.
我这边的问题差不多也就是这些了，然后也非常感谢 Craig 今天能来和我们进行交流。然后我最后是一个小小的邀请，也期待着 Craig 可以继续游玩我们7月9号上线的版本。然后我们在7月的版本之中和后续的更新版本之中也准备了更多的内容，比如更多的 PVP 和 PVE 的玩法，以及我们正在制作的新的区域和新的游戏剧本，也在不久之后就会跟玩家去见面。然后也期待着 Craig 能游玩 Once Human， 然后也期待着下一次跟 Craig 进行交流的机会。
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is a really unique opportunity, and it was great to be able to talk about how our two teams develop games and how we think about what the MMO genre is evolving into.
Okay, I would like to take this advantage to thank all of the players who's keep supporting us. That's the motivation behind the development team, to continuously craft Once Human to become a better world. And secondly, we would like to, on behalf of the Starry Studio, to address the appreciation to Greg, because we know that you're a busy man working on your own project. So we would like to wish you have a huge success on your own as well. And in the future, we are looking forward to have a further collaboration between our products.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really glad we could help out, and I hope it helps make your game a big success.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
Bye.